of association. Measure of association describes the strength of relationship between an exposure and an outcome. So measure of association is the strength of relationship between an exposure and an outcome. Under ideal condition, it would be possible to accurately measure the effect of an exposure by comparing the number of outcome in a group or exposed subject with the actual number of outcome had they had been exposed. And it is not possible to recreate the hypothetical state. The measure of association that can be calculated from the epidemiological studies depend upon the particular study design. In both cohort study and randomized controlled trials, that is RCT, which are a subtype of cohort study, the study group are determined by whether or not the subject are exposed to a putative cause. So the outcome of interest can be categorized as either present or absent. Subjects who are at risk of developing the outcome are followed over a period of time to see whether or not they developed it or not. In a case control study, however, the group are determined by whether or not the subject having particular outcome of interest, such as a disease with a prior exposure of being assessed retrospectively. Now, what is correlation and regression? The word correlation is used in everyday life to denote some form of association. We might say that we have noticed a correlation between the foggy day and attack of dizziness. However, in statistical terms, we use the correlation to denote the association between the two quantitative variables. Sometimes two continuous characteristics are measured in the same person, such as weight and cholesterol and weight and height. This is just an example. At that time, the same characteristic is measured in two related groups, such as tallness in a parent and tallness in children, study of intelligent quotient in brother and corresponding system. So the relationship or association between the quantitatively measured or continuous variable is called as correlation. When two variable characteristics in the same series or individual are measured in quantitative units such as height and weight, temperature and pulse rate, age and vital capacity of a lung, it is necessary not only to whether it is association between the two, or we should also know the extent or strength of the relationship. This slide is showing the example, showing the temperature and the pulse rate. So there are different types of correlation. There are 5 types of correlation. First one is perfect positive correlation, perfect negative correlation, then the moderately positive correlation, moderately negative correlation, and absolutely no correlation. So perfect positive correlation, perfect negative correlation, moderately positive correlation, moderately negative correlation, and absolutely no correlation. There are different types of 5 types of correlation. So what is perfect positive correlation? The two variables are denoted by the letter X and Y. The variables are directly proportional and directly related to each other. Both relationships rise and fall in the same proportion. This is the example. We don't have to go in such detail. The graph form a straight line rising from the lower end of the both X and Y axis. When the scatter diagram is drawn, all the points fall into a straight line. You can see in the diagram. And in perfect negative correlation, when X and Y are inversely proportional to each other, that is when one rises, the other fall in the same proportion. You can see in the diagram. There is no scatter and the graph will contain a straight line with all the observation on it. In moderately positive correlation, in this case, no zero value of coefficient lies between the 0 and +1. You can see in this diagram. Then moderately negative correlation, in this case, no zero of value of coefficient lies between -1 and 0. You can see the example, that is age and vital capacity in adult, or we can see another example is rainfall and groundnut oil prices in the Maharashtra. This diagram is showing that relationship. Then absolutely no correlation in this situation. Here the value of correlation coefficient is 0, indicating that no linear relationship exists between the two variables, and there is no mean or imaginary line indicating the trend of correlation. In this, the x is completely independent of y. You can see in this diagram. This is slide is showing that absolutely there is no relationship between. Then come correlation coefficient. The degree of association is measured by a correlation coefficient that is denoted by R. It is sometimes called as Pearson correlation and coefficient after it originated, and it's measured on a linear association. If the curved line is needed to express the relationship, other and more complicated measure of the correlation must be used. The correlation coefficient is called the Pearson correlation coefficient, and this is the formula which is showing the correlation coefficient. And when the two variables are related but they do not follow the normal distribution, and another correlation coefficient which is that is known as Spearman rank correlation. In such situation, it is used. Spearman rank correlation is used, which is shown by this diagram. Sorry, by the formula. Now, what is regression equation? Correlation describes the strength of an association between two variables and is completely symmetrical. The correlation between A and B is the same as the correlation between B and A. However, if the number of two variables are related, it means that when one changes by a certain amount of the other changes on an average by a certain amount. If y represents the dependent variable and x represents the independent variable, this relationship is described as a regression of y on x. The relationship can be represented by a simple equation that is called as regression equation. The regression equation representing how much y changes with any given chance of x can be used to construct a regression line on a scatter diagram. And in the simplest case, this is assumed to be a straight line. The direction in which the line slope depends on whether the correlation is positive or negative. When two sets of observation increases or decreases together, the line slopes upwards from the left to right, and when one set decreases, the other increases, and the line slope downwards from the left to right. Regression equation is shown by this diagram, by this formula. So regression, what is regression? Is a statistical method for studying the relationship between a single dependent variable, one or more independent variable. It is used to find the association between two variables where there are many variables. Correlation has to be done before doing the regression. So correlation has to be done before doing the regression. Regression might imply the causation of by giving the prediction. And what is correlation? Correlation when dealing with the measurement of measurement on two sets of variables in the same person, and one variable may be related to other. And so in same way, such as fluoride level in the drinking water, the community fluoride index that is change in the value of one variable result in the change in the value of other. The relationship between such variable is a correlation. So correlation always has to be done before the regression. Regression might imply the causation of any prediction. The regression equation is often more useful than the correlation coefficient. It can easily be shown that any straight line passing through the mean value of x and y will give the total prediction error of 0 because the positive and negative term exactly cancel. And to remove the negative sign, we square the differences and the regression equation chosen to minimize the same sum of the square of the prediction errors. And we need the sample estimate of ny a and b. And it can be shown that one straight line can minimize and the least square estimate, and this is given by this formula. So regression line give us useful information about the data, and they are collected from. They show how one variable changes on an average with another, and they can be used to find out whether what one variable is likely to be when is known to the another. To project a line at the either end. So here we finished our topic. So there are some more advanced method also. More than one independent variable is possible. In such a case, the method is known as the multiple regression. And this is the most versatile of statistical method and can be used in many situations. For example, in a clinical trial, the independent variable may be outcome after the treatment, and the first independent variable can be binary 0 for placebo and 1 for active treatment. And the second independent variable may be baseline variable measured for a treatment but likely to affect the outcome. So, in conclusion, research is a quest for knowledge, though diligent search or investigation or experimentation aimed at the discovery and interpretation of a new knowledge. Scientific method is a systematic body of procedure and technique applied in carrying out the investigation or experimentation targeted at obtaining a new knowledge. Research and scientific method may be considered a course of critical inquiry leading to the discovery of a fact or information which increases our understanding of a human health and disease. So what we have done today, mean, median, mode. What is mode? The most frequently occurring result is a set of data is a mode. What is median? A measure of the typical individual obtained by the ranking of an individual result is in the data set from the smallest to the largest and selecting the middle value. This is the mean. This is the median. And what is mean? Measure of a typical individual obtained by observing a data set is a mean. And I was talking about the multiple regression analysis. What is called that? An extension of a regression analysis that describes the test and the relationship between a dependent variable and a linear combination of serial independent variable. In such case, we need a multiple regression analysis. What is normal distribution curve? The pattern followed by very many set of continuous measurement, and it is characterized by the symmetrical well-shaped curve. This is normal distribution. What is null hypothesis? Just a quick revision. What is null hypothesis? The first step in testing of hypothesis is to set up an appropriate hypothesis with the problem. The null hypothesis asserts that there is no real difference between the two groups under the consideration, and the difference found is an accidental and arise out of sampling variation. What is paired t-test? A variant of t-test used when the test result form a logical pair. This is paired t-test. What is non-parametric test? A family member of statistical test that do not require any assumption about the distribution the data set follows and that do not require the testing or distribution parameter such as mean of variation. What is histogram? Histogram in presentation of data. A graphical presentation of a pattern of a variance present in a set of a data. It is obtained by splitting a measurement scale into an interval and displaying the number of individuals falling into each interval. This is histogram. What is hypothesis? Hypothesis is a proposition, condition, or a principle that predicts or indicates a relationship between or behavior of variable under certain conditions. What is probability? Probability, the chance or likelihood of a particular event happening or expressed as a proportion of 1, with a 0 denoting impossible and 1 absolutely certain. In selection of sample, what is purposive selection? The deliberate selection of a sample because it is believed to be representative of a target population. This is I'm talking in a sampling, purposive sampling, just a quick revision. The deliberately selection of a sample because it is believed to be representative of a target population. What is random sampling? A procedure of selecting a sample from a population that removes the selection decision entirely from a control of the investigator, hence eliminating the possibility of a investigator to induce bias. Bias is what? Bias is nothing a error. What is range? The difference between the smallest and the largest result is a set of in a set of data. So range is nothing. It is the difference between the smallest and the largest result in a set of a data. What is sample? The group of individual sample is nothing. That's just a group of individuals who are actually available for the investigation. And the sample is selected from the population of interest. What is sampling frame? The listing of members from which the sample is to be drawn is known as sampling frame. What is standard deviation? A measure of the magnitude of the variation present in the set of a data. So it is obtained by finding the square root of the variance and therefore it is expressed in a conventional measurement unit. It is a standard deviation. And standard error is what? Standard error, a measure of the variability of the mean sample and the variation in the mean value, which would be seen if a number of samples were collected. So it is how it is obtained. Standard error is obtained by dividing the standard deviation of a sample value by the square root of a sample size. There is a proper formula for standard deviation. What is t-test? The statistical procedure used to test the equality of the mean of two samples. So it assumed that the result follow a normal distribution and the variance of the two samples are equal. In such situation, t-test is used. What is type 1 error and type 2 error? Type 1 error is also known as the alpha and type 2 is beta. So type 1 error is being misled by the sample evidence into rejecting the null hypothesis when it is in a fact true. And type 2 error is being misled by the sample evidence into failing to reject the null hypothesis when it is in a fact false. Variable is nothing, is a measurement that can take the range of possible values. What is retrospective study? A study is also known as the case control study that looks backward in the time when the final disease outcome to a potential cause. In it, a group of affected individual and unaffected individual are compared in the extent of their exposure of a suspected risk group. What is longitudinal surveys? A survey that describe or measure a population at a several points in a given time or in a time. Cluster sampling. Cluster sampling is, I already discussed, sampling procedure often used when sampling units naturally form themselves into a group or a cluster. A number of such clusters are randomly selected from a list of clusters, and all the sampling units in such selected cluster are entered into the final sample. So cluster sampling is nothing a sampling procedure used when sampling units form a natural group or a cluster. What is ANOVA? That is analysis of variance. It is a widely used statistical technique that determine the presence of an effect of estimating the variance associated with it and comparing this with a benchmark variance known to purely random. Binomial distribution. What is binomial distribution? This is the pattern usually followed by a set of a binomial measurement provided that the individual involved do not influence or one another behavior. And binomial measurement, a measurement in which the individual is placed in one of the two mutually exclusively categories. Five type of correlation: perfect positive correlation, perfect negative correlation, moderately positive correlation, moderately negative correlation, absolutely no correlation. We have seen the example of each correlation. Parametric and non-parametric test. Non-parametric is chi-square test, Fisher-exact test, and so on. And parametric is t-test, z-test, ANOVA. Correlation regression comes under parametric test. ANOVA is known as analysis of variance, and sometimes it is known as the F-test. Student t-test. Chi-square test we already discussed. Test of significance. Type 1 error and type 2 error. Normal distribution curve. Coefficient of variable, mean deviation, range, measure of dispersion or range, standard deviation, coefficient of variation and mean deviation, mean median mode, that is a central tendency. Measure of central tendencies, mean median mode. In presentation of data, pie diagram, bar diagram, component bar diagram, multiple bar diagram, simple bar diagram. This is how we present the qualitative data. That is a bar diagram in which there is simple, multiple component, percentage, pie diagram, pictogram, make diagram, spot diagram. These are the examples. Presentation of a data mainly done in tabulation and drawing form. Two types of data is there, qualitative and the quantitative data. So we have covered the introduction part, uses of biostatistics, sampling, data collection and presentation, measure of central tendency, measure of dispersion, normal distribution curve, or test of significance, parametric and non-parametric test. We all have covered this topic.